Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. My name's Jono, I'm the tech tutor here at Te Pae Tata. Today in this video, I'm going to walk you through how to build a gaming machine, hopefully on a budget. This video is designed to sort of give you some ideas or help you think about things that you may not have thought about if you are building a machine for the first time, things to look out for and things that I would do if I were to build a gaming machine on a budget. So what we're going to do, we're going to go straight to the PB Tech website. They've got a really cool PC builder. If we go down here to Departments Computer, you'll see PC Builder over here. This is a really awesome tool, and the cool thing about this is PB Tech will back and guarantee anything in terms of things working together, or they make sure that it will all work. Now, I have found that there are a few limitations on this, and if you are an experienced builder, you can absolutely sort of go off the grid and do things a little bit differently. But if you are trying to build a machine for the first time, this is a really great place to start. So through the builder, you've got a few different options here. We're going to go straight into gaming PC. And again, you'll see here a ton of different options. These are all sort of different base models that you can start building your machine from. Obviously, you've got the Ryzen and the Intel series, so your AMD or your Intel. If you're not familiar with this, then I mean, the whole way through, I still would recommend that you do a little bit of homework so you know what you're grabbing. Personally, I like Intel. I've always used Intel. I have had AMD builds in the past, and to be honest, for most users, you're not going to notice a huge amount of difference. But if you are sort of really stubborn and a bit of a purist like myself, I tend to stick to what I love and what I know, and I prefer Intel over Ryzen. Yes, AMD, you will get a bit more bang for your buck, and they are a bit cheaper and the performance can be a little bit better, but in the long run, Intel always sort of, for me, seems to come out on top. So in this build, I'm just going to select an Intel build. With these base models, you've got different series, the GTX 1650 or the 1660 or the RX 560, which is an AMD graphics card as opposed to sort of the NVIDIA ones. And obviously you can go up to the RTX 2070 and whatnot, but because this is on a budget, you're not going to get an RTX in your gaming machine as well as, without compromising on CPU or RAM or anything like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the most basic of builds, and we're going to build our way up from there. Now, as I run through this, I'll try to explain the differences on the options that I would choose and why I would do them, or just things that you would want to look into and do your homework on. And the first thing that I see when you come into this is always double check what they're offering here. So the first, they're just offering you a case. Now, for some reason, they've given you a case that's $150 odd, which brings our total budget down here, but you'll see this change. So I would go into more options, and I would buy a significantly lower case. A case is a case. It's not really going to do a huge amount for you, so I would probably save myself $70 here and put that $70 into a better CPU or a better graphics card. So let's go with a more basic case. Obviously, it's entirely up to you. You can do what you want to do, but I would go for a cheaper one. Now, what we've got here is we've got a GTX 1660. Whoops. I would probably pump that up to a sorry, did I say I mean 1650. I would pump that up to a 1660, and the difference being is the 1650s tend to only have 4 gig of RAM, whereas the 1660s, they're a lot faster bus speeds, and they'll have 6 gig of RAM, meaning that they'll be able to handle a lot more performance and a lot higher graphics. A few different models here. You obviously got single fans, dual fans, and although the stats may sound very, very similar, for the single one here, you've only got 1800 megahertz. When if you go down to some of these larger overclocked ones, you got a few, and it doesn't seem a lot, but it does make a big difference. So somewhere in the middle of the road, going for a Super SC here would be a good CPU to, good GPU to buy, I'm going to go out on a limb here and I'm going to get a slightly higher one. I would suggest this particular model, the Gigabyte GeForce 1660 Super. It is a little bit more expensive, but I'm going to go on the basis that we're going to buy this machine, we're going to buy it once. So if you were considering of sort of just getting a core machine and then upgrading your bits over time, you might want to look at just getting an i3 now and upgrading to an i7 later. But let's just go on. We're going to build this once. We're going to build it right. So for gaming, you definitely don't want an i3. Yes, you could use an i3, but I would recommend going up to an i5. Again, the biggest differences are the cores and the threads. These are generally used for multitasking or processing and stuff like that. I would highly recommend going for the most basic i5. You'll see sort of different versions of them here. Rather than going for the highest end i3. So let's just jump on this i5 now. Now what we've got up here, I've got a few links that I was looking at before. When looking at CPUs or processors, this i5 9400, now this 94 is the old 9th gen. You'll see the one we've got in here is the 10th gen. I'll explain a little bit of differences afterwards, but I just want to point out 9400F and 9400 nothing. $50 or $60 difference. What is the difference? Well, this particular model down here has your graphics built into it, so it's got a onboard GPU. This model here does not have onboard graphics. So if you were to plug this in, your computer's just not going to run unless you had a graphics card handling that. So again, this comes down to a little bit of knowledge and understanding PCs and computer componentry, but you could absolutely go for a model like this and save yourself $60, put it into a graphics card. But that's sort of the difference there. Again, with you'll see this model, the 9400. At the moment, I think they're up to the 10400. So this is the 10th gen. Down here, you've only got the 9th gen. And when we're looking on the PC Builder, because the 10th gen is the latest model, they have removed all the 9th gen chips, and they're only selling the latest chips. What this sort of means is when you're choosing a motherboard, you will need to get a motherboard that supports the 10th gen chips. And as I mentioned earlier, PBTech guarantee or the compatibility of the componentry on this. So when you select one of these 10th gen chips, all the motherboards that they give you will support 10th gen chips. As I said, it is a little bit limiting because not all the options are there for you, but what options they do offer on the website, they guarantee that they'll absolutely work with each other, and you'll have that peace of mind that you're not going to build a machine sort of uncertain that it's going to work or not. So that's the beauty of this builder. But as I said, if you knew a little bit about computer componentry, you probably could go off the grid and buy components that will be compatible if you knew what you're doing. But let's just say this is your first build, we're doing it on a budget, and that's sort of the format that I'm going by here. We'll come down to motherboards shortly. In these CPUs, they will have a CPU cooler. Now, it just comes in the box. You absolutely need one. If you wanted to and you had the budget for it, you could buy an aftermarket cooler. If you did, I would say go with something cool down here, like a water-cooled unit that has a radiator in its cooler. There's no point in upgrading a fan for another fan. You may as well, if you're going to do it, go water cooling. It's quieter, it cools it down better. Yeah, there's some concerns that you're running water through electronics, but they're pretty safe. And I'd go something like this here, the ML240 master cooler, cooler master, sorry. And they do come with cool RGBs and stuff like that, but this is more about performance rather than anything else. And because we're keeping it on a budget, we're not going to upgrade the CPU cooler, but it is something that you could consider later on. Again, with RAM, the basic one they've got here is just an 8 gig. Let's have a look at some more options. If you're building a gaming machine, I'll definitely go for a 16 gig. Now you could go for this one here for $129. I'd probably pump up to this HyperX Fury. They are gaming RAM sticks, so they, although the speeds are a little, actually they're the same here, but you will notice a little bit of difference. These HyperXs are gaming ones, so I would suggest go for this one here. Spend the extra $10. Next, we come against storage. Now, this is probably the most crucial part of it. Yes, it's only minimal and it doesn't generally offer a lot of performance difference, but there's some new forms of storage devices out there on the market that you absolutely need to be aware of. So what we're looking at here, everyone knows, these are your SATA, so these are your SSD storage devices, as opposed to your old sort of big disk hard disk drive, which you'll see here. A big hard disk drive, which is big magnetic spinning disks, whereas this one's more solid state. It's like a flash drive. What I personally would suggest, if your motherboard supports it, which all the ones we're looking at here do, or the modern ones do, I'd go for something like this this M2 chip. When you are getting an M2 chip, make sure you get the NVMe. You'll see some here. Where was it earlier? This one. This one does not have the NVMe. I personally don't know what it stands for, but I do know what it does. So you'll see here that this has a read and write speed of good old 500 megabytes. Now what happens is when we're coming down the line later, you want to get something. This one here will run 4 times faster. Some of them you'll see will run up to 3200. Let me find one for you. They will be in here. Here we go, 3500 megabytes. So that's 6 times faster than an SSD, and an SSD are already significantly faster than your standard hard drive. So out of all of these here, I'd go for a 500 gig NVMe M2. This particular one here, it's obviously more than your 250 or something like that, but this is the particular chip I would purchase on this build. Going down to, if you have the budget, I know we're sort of creeping up there a little bit. If you do have the budget, because you've only got 500 gig, I would go for a good old cheap basic 1 terabyte hard drive, and have this as a backup. So we've got 1.5 terabytes. Yes, we are spending a little bit more, but you've got 2 different hard drives. I would install your operating system on this one and any of your sort of core products, because it will read and write a lot faster, and then you've just got a ton of storage here for backing up any files, photos, videos, downloads, you name it. So we have crept a little bit over, but I think what we can do is, if we have a look at the power supply here, if it allows us to, you could potentially go out and buy a slightly cheaper model. Like, you don't necessarily need a 700 watt. You could get a 550 or 600, but they don't necessarily give you the options here. So I guess we're going to have to go for this cheapest one. But again, if you are building something without going through this builder, 700 watt is a bit of an overkill. You don't really need to go that high. Again, operating system, Windows Home will work perfectly fine. If you are using it in an office environment, you'll definitely want Windows Professional, so you can connect to different domains and whatnot. But for your average home builder on a budget, Windows Home is going to get the trick done. Now, they do charge a $100 assembly fee, because literally they build the whole thing and then they ship it out to you. And if you're not sure what you're doing, it's well worth the $100. Okay, so we have crept a little bit over the $2,000 mark, which I was hoping to keep it under. Obviously, that doesn't include a monitor, doesn't include keyboard and mice. That's literally just the computer case and build inside. If we were to bring this down under $2,000, if you couldn't do it, I'd probably drop out the hard drive and purchase it later on. You could I mean, if we're looking at motherboards here, I think that's going to be the cheapest one. With motherboards, I think I skipped over these. Sorry, there's not a huge amount of difference in the motherboards in this price range. I think you're sacrificing a few different USB ports or things like that, but most of these in here will have um, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth built in. So when it offers you the option to add, oh, it doesn't even give you the option here. To add wireless. Perhaps they know that it's already got wireless built in, so they've removed it from the website. Older ones that I've seen will say, "Do you need, wireless connectivity?" But they all are on board here on the motherboard. So that's pretty much what I would look at here for a $2,000. That's probably going to be your best budget build that I would recommend going with. What have I got up here? A few different links that I was just going to show you. So if you're wanting to compare the differences between models, this userbenchmark.com is a fantastic website for comparing what you're looking at. So if we wanted to compare an i5 against the Ryzen 5 to see the differences here, you can sort of see where they sit against how many times they've been benchmarked. So fewer people would have this i5. That was because I would suggest people have either gone for an i7 or an i9, whereas this here is a very cheap, common processor. It's been benchmarked, a few 100,000 times more, and it sits lower. So this i5 I would recommend over this, and again it comes down to that bang for buck, but I would still go for Intel over it. So these websites are fantastic for comparing. Let's say that you wanted a different, let's compare a i3 10th gen. We'll go for this one here. You'll see here that even the i3 potentially beats the Ryzen 5, but what you're looking at here, it's got less cores and less threads. And for gaming, although this doesn't sit as well as this, I can guarantee you that this is going to be a better CPU. But if you buy an AMD CPU, then you're going to need to buy componentry like a motherboard that supports this chipset. You couldn't use the same motherboard for these two chips because they run completely differently. Again, other websites or programs that I would use if you are wanting to compare how it is, the MSI Afterburner, which is this website here. Once you've got your build, if you wanted to see how many frame rates or how much percentage your CPU or your GPU is running at, this MSI Afterburner is a great app. It tells you all your stats, how your computer's running, and it's a really good way to benchmark or sort of strength test how your computer build is going. And on that, if you did have any questions, by all means pop down and see us at Te Pae Tata. My name's Jono. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions or any queries that you had if you were looking at building a gaming machine, and run you through sort of a few of the different options. Obviously, what we saw on this PB Tech Builder, this is prices or componentry that's available on today's date. And this is guaranteed to change. It will either go up or down in price. Quite often componentry will go up in price, depending on demands and markets and what's happening around the world, like COVID, for instance. Or if a newer model comes out, like that 10th gen chip, which has only just come out, is very, very new. They've replaced all the 9th gen with the 10th gen chips. So again, a couple of things to look out for. If you did have any questions, please reach out to us. I'm going to conclude the video on that point, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Ka kite.